The notification pinged on my phone at exactly 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October. I'd been lying awake for hours, staring at the ceiling of our master bedroom while David snored peacefully beside me. The blue glow of my screen illuminated the darkness as I read the message from Family Tree DNA. Your family member's results are ready. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My stepdaughter Emma had submitted her DNA sample 3 weeks ago as part of a college genealogy project. At 19, she was fascinated by ancestry and family history, constantly pestering David about his relatives and childhood memories. The test had been her birthday gift to herself, purchased with money from her part-time job at the campus bookstore. I clicked on the notification, expecting to see the usual mix of European and perhaps some unexpected ethnic surprises that most people discover in their genetic profiles. What I found instead made my blood freeze in my veins. Emma Catherine Morrison. No paternal DNA match with David James Morrison. I read the line 3 times, my hands trembling as I held the phone. The clinical language of the report couldn't mask the devastating implications. According to the test, David was not Emma's biological father, but that was impossible. I'd met David when Emma was 12, and he'd always spoken about her mother Claire with the kind of bitter fondness reserved for ex-wives who'd left messy divorces in their wake. Claire had died in a car accident 2 years before we met, leaving David to raise Emma alone. Their relationship had its typical father-daughter dynamics, his protective instincts, her teenage rebellion, his pride in her academic achievements. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor as I made my way to my home office. The house was a sprawling colonial in Westchester County, David's dream home that he'd bought after his promotion to senior partner at his law firm. Every corner reflected his success: imported marble, custom cabinetry, original artwork that cost more than most people's cars. In my office, I powered up my laptop and created a new email account under a false name. If I was going to investigate this, I needed to be careful. David was a corporate attorney specializing in intellectual property law, but his attention to detail and suspicious nature extended far beyond his professional life. He monitored our joint accounts, casually questioned my whereabouts, and had opinions about every friendship I maintained. The DNA report was still open on my phone. I studied the technical details, trying to understand what I was reading. Emma's maternal lineage was clearly documented, matching samples from Claire's sister who had also taken the test years ago. But the paternal side showed no connection to David or any of his known relatives. More disturbing was what the report did show. Emma had a half-sister, Madison Clark, age 16, living in Portland, Oregon. The system had flagged them as siblings sharing the same biological father. I clicked on Madison's profile, which was sparse but public. Her photo showed a teenager with Emma's distinctive green eyes and auburn hair, the same dimpled chin that I'd always assumed Emma had inherited from David. My heart pounded as I began connecting dots I didn't want to connect. If Emma wasn't David's biological daughter, but David had raised her believing she was his child, then either Claire had deceived him or David knew the truth and had been lying to everyone, including me, for years. I thought about our wedding 3 years ago, the beautiful ceremony at the country club where David had walked Emma down the aisle as my maid of honor. His toast had been touching, speaking about how lucky he felt to gain not just a wife, but to see Emma gain a stepmother who would love and support her. The tears in his eyes had seemed so genuine. I pulled up our security system app on my laptop. David had installed cameras throughout the house 2 years ago, citing security concerns about our valuable art collection. The system recorded continuously, storing footage for 90 days. I'd never bothered to access it before, but suddenly I needed to know what happened in our house when I wasn't there. The interface was more complex than I'd expected. David had set it up with multiple user levels, and my access was limited to viewing current feeds. But there was a guest account he'd mentioned once, created for the housekeeping service to monitor their work. I tried the password he used for everything else. Emma's birthday combined with his law school graduation year. Bingo. The guest account had broader access, including archived footage. I scrolled back through recent recordings, looking for anything unusual. Most of it was mundane. Emma coming and going from college, our housekeeper Maria's weekly visits, David and me in our normal routines. Then I found something that made my stomach drop. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Last Thursday afternoon, while I was at my book club meeting, David had received a visitor. A woman in her 40s with shoulder-length blonde hair, wearing an expensive coat that screamed money and sophistication. The timestamp showed she'd arrived at 2:15 p.m. and stayed until 4:30 p.m. I'd never seen her before. David had let her in through the front door, and they'd moved immediately to his study, one of the few rooms without camera coverage. When they emerged 2 hours later, both looked tense. The woman handed David an envelope before leaving. He'd stood in the doorway watching her drive away in a black Mercedes SUV. After she left, David had gone to the kitchen and poured himself 3 fingers of his most expensive scotch. In the 15 years we'd been together, I'd seen him drink hard liquor during the day, exactly twice, when his father died and when Emma had been in a car accident her freshman year of college. Screenshot the woman's image and ran it through reverse image search, but nothing came up. She was beautiful in that polished, professional way that suggested money and power. Her posture and expensive accessories indicated someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. The envelope she'd given David haunted me. I'd been home when he returned from work that day, and he'd seemed normal, affectionate, asking about my day, helping with dinner. But now I remembered small details that hadn't seemed significant at the time. His phone had been face down all evening. He'd mentioned being tired and had gone to bed earlier than usual. When I'd tried to initiate intimacy, he'd claimed a headache. I scrolled through more footage, looking for other unusual visitors or behavior. David's routine was typically predictable: work, gym, home. But as I dug deeper into the archived recordings, patterns emerged that I'd missed in real time. Phone calls taken in the garage where there were no cameras. Multiple trips to his study with the door closed. 3 occasions in the past month when he'd left the house on weekends claiming errands that seemed to take longer than necessary. Most disturbing was what I found from 2 months ago. David had accessed Emma's room while she was at college, spending over an hour inside. When he emerged, he was carrying a manila folder that I'd never seen before. Emma kept important documents in a filing cabinet in her room: birth certificate, passport, school records. Things any parent might need access to. But David's demeanor on the recording looked furtive, guilty even. I grabbed my phone and called Emma, forgetting about the early hour until her voicemail picked up. "Hey, it's me. I know it's early, but can you call me when you get this? It's about your DNA test results. Nothing urgent, just want to talk through them with you." My hands shook as I ended the call. If David wasn't Emma's biological father, who was? And why had he maintained the deception for so long? Emma was an adult now, legally and financially independent through her academic scholarships and trust fund from Claire's life insurance. What did he have to gain by continuing the lie? Unless it wasn't about Emma at all. Unless it was about me? I thought about our prenuptial agreement, carefully crafted by David's law firm. I'd signed it without much thought, trusting his assurances that it was standard protection for both of us. But now I wondered what provisions it contained regarding infidelity or deception. The sun was beginning to rise, casting long shadows across my office walls. David would be awake soon, following his rigid morning routine of coffee, news, and 30 minutes on the treadmill. I needed to appear normal while I processed what I'd discovered. I deleted my browsing history and closed all the windows on my laptop. The DNA report was still open on my phone, that devastating line glowing in the morning light. No paternal DNA match. Emma called back at 7:30 a.m., just as David was leaving for work. "Sorry for the early call," she said, her voice bright with college student energy. "What's up with the DNA results?" I haven't had a chance to look at them yet. Midterms are killing me. I watched David through the kitchen window as he loaded his briefcase into his BMW. Nothing major, I lied. Just thought you might find the ethnic breakdown interesting. We can talk about it when you're home for Thanksgiving. Cool. Hey, is Dad still being weird about me dating Marcus? He barely spoke during our last video call. David had indeed been cold toward Emma's boyfriend, a psychology major from Detroit whose crime seemed to be his lack of trust fund and Ivy League pedigree. You know how protective he is, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. After Emma hung up, I sat in the silence of our empty house, surrounded by the life David and I had built together. The granite countertops he'd insisted on, the custom cabinets that had cost more than a car, the professional family photos lining the hallway, all of it suddenly felt like a stage set for a play I didn't know I was performing in. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Long day ahead. Dinner at 7? I typed back, of course. Love you. The lie came so easily that it scared me. I spent the day researching DNA testing accuracy and paternity law, diving deep into forums and scientific articles. The technology was remarkably reliable. False negatives for paternity were virtually impossible. If the test said David wasn't Emma's father, then he wasn't. But the deeper question remained. Did David know? I thought about Claire, the woman whose shadow had loomed over our entire marriage. David kept a photo of her in his study, claiming it was for Emma's sake, but I'd always sensed something unresolved in how he spoke about his late wife. Their marriage had been rocky, he'd admitted, with frequent separations and reconciliation attempts. Had Claire had an affair? Had she confessed to David before her death, leaving him to raise another man's child out of love or obligation? Or had he discovered the truth some other way and chosen to keep it secret? The alternative was more sinister. If David had known from the beginning that Emma wasn't his daughter, what did that say about his character? What else might he be hiding? I pulled up our joint financial accounts, looking for irregularities or patterns I might have missed. David managed most of our investments and major expenses, claiming his legal background made him better suited for financial planning. I'd been content to let him handle the details, focusing on my part-time work as a freelance editor and my volunteer commitments. Now, I wondered if my financial ignorance had been intentional on his part or just convenient. The accounts showed the usual expenses, mortgage payments, utility bills, Emma's college costs, our regular dining and entertainment charges. But there were also cash withdrawals I couldn't account for. $500 here, $1,000 there, always from ATMs in parts of the city where we had no reason to be. I called our bank, claiming to be confused about some recent transactions. The customer service representative was helpful, explaining that the cash withdrawals had been happening regularly for about 6 months. All were made with David's card during business hours on weekdays. After hanging up, I sat staring at the bank statement spread across my desk. Whatever David was doing with that money, he was being careful to keep it separate from our traceable spending. Cash left no digital trail, no credit card receipts, no way for me to follow where it was going or what it was buying. The mysterious blonde woman's visit began to take on more significance. Had she been blackmailing David? Was someone threatening to expose Emma's true parentage? Or was there something even darker lurking beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life? I thought about the envelope she'd given him, the way his hands had shaken slightly as he'd accepted it. The timing was too convenient to ignore. The visit had happened just 3 weeks before Emma submitted her DNA sample. Had someone tipped David off about what she was planning to do? My phone rang, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. The caller ID showed David's office number. "Hi, honey," he said, his voice carrying that warm tone he used when he was trying to charm me. I know I said dinner at 7, but I'm running behind on the Henderson case. Rain check for tomorrow? Of course, I replied, forcing brightness into my voice. I'll just grab something simple. You're the best. Oh, and I might be late tonight. Probably not home until after 10. Don't wait up. After he hung up, I realized he'd given me the perfect opportunity. If David wouldn't be home until late, I had hours to search his study thoroughly. The room had always been his sanctuary, off limits to me under the guise of client, confidentiality, and attorney privilege. But attorney privilege didn't extend to family secrets and personal deceptions. I waited until Maria finished cleaning and left at 5, ensuring I was completely alone in the house. David's study was located on the first floor, a masculine retreat filled with law books, expensive whiskey, and the kind of heavy furniture meant to impress clients and intimidate opponents. His desk was locked, but I knew where he kept the spare key, taped under the drawer of a side table, a hiding spot he thought was clever but was actually rather obvious. The first drawer contained the usual office supplies and legal pads, but the second revealed a collection of files that made my heart race. There were documents related to Emma's trust fund, but not the standard paperwork I'd expected. Instead, I found correspondence with a private investigator named Robert Chen, detailing surveillance reports and background checks. The dates went back years, starting shortly after Claire's death and continuing right up to last month. David had been investigating Emma's biological father. The reports painted a picture of a man named Dr. Michael Chen, no relation to the investigator, a cardiologist in Portland who had worked at the same hospital as Claire during a brief period when she and David were separated. The timeline matched Emma's conception perfectly. Dr. Chen was married with 3 children, including Madison Clark, the half-sister who had shown up in Emma's DNA results. The investigators' reports included photographs, home addresses, financial information, and personal details that had clearly taken significant time and money to compile. But the most shocking discovery was a letter dated 6 months ago, written in David's careful handwriting but never sent. The draft was addressed to Dr. Chen, informing him about Emma's existence and demanding a meeting to discuss financial and legal obligations. David had known about Emma's parentage for years, but only recently had he tried to contact her biological father. I photographed each document with my phone, my hands shaking as I documented the evidence of David's deception. At the bottom of the file was a business card for a family law attorney who specialized in paternity cases, along with notes about inheritance rights and legal standing for non-biological parents. The picture was becoming clearer. David had raised Emma believing she was his daughter, but when she became a legal adult with access to trust funds and inheritance rights, he'd begun to worry about the legal implications of the deception. If Emma discovered the truth, would she have grounds to challenge his guardianship decisions? Could Dr. Chen emerge to claim parental rights or financial obligations? The cash withdrawals suddenly made sense. David had been paying the private investigator in untraceable payments, keeping the investigation off our joint financial records. I was replacing the files when I heard the sound of the garage door opening. David was home 3 hours early. Panic flooded my system as I rushed to lock the desk and return the key to its hiding place. I could hear his footsteps in the kitchen, followed by the familiar sound of him loosening his tie and pouring himself a drink. "Melody?" he called out. "I'm home early. Thought we could have that dinner after all." I emerged from his study, hoping my face didn't betray the racing of my heart. "Wonderful," I said, moving toward the kitchen. "Give me a few minutes to throw something together." David was standing by the counter, still in his work clothes but with his tie removed and top button undone. He looked tired, older than his 52 years, with new lines around his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. "Everything okay?" he asked, studying my face with the intensity he usually reserved for cross-examining witnesses. "You look flushed." "Just rushing around," I lied, busying myself with dinner preparations. "How was your day?" He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with the scotch on his breath. "The usual. Corporate law isn't exactly thrilling, but it pays the bills." Those bills included payments to a private investigator and family law attorney, secret cash withdrawals, and maintaining a deception that had lasted Emma's entire life. I wanted to confront him, to demand explanations and honesty, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way his hand rested on the knife block as he watched me cook. Maybe it was the realization that I was married to a man capable of maintaining such an elaborate lie for years. Or maybe it was the growing certainty that David's secrets ran deeper than Emma's parentage. "How's Emma doing?" he asked casually, refilling his glass. She mentioned something about a genealogy project in her last call. The question felt like a test. Did he know about the DNA test? Had someone tipped him off about the results? I thought about the mysterious blonde woman, the timing of her visit, the envelope she'd handed him. "Fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You know how college kids are with their projects. Always something new and fascinating," David nodded. But I caught him studying my reflection in the kitchen window, watching for any sign that I knew more than I was letting on. As I prepared our dinner, I realized that our entire marriage had been built on a foundation of lies. The question was no longer whether David was hiding Emma's true parentage. The evidence was overwhelming. The question was what else he was hiding and how far he was willing to go to protect his secrets. Outside, darkness was falling over our perfect suburban neighborhood. Inside, I stood next to my husband of 3 years, both of us performing the roles of loving couple while harboring secrets that could destroy everything. But I had one advantage David didn't know about. I had access to the security cameras, documentation of his activities, and most importantly, I had the truth about Emma's DNA test. Now I just had to decide what to do with that power. The timer on the oven chimed, interrupting my thoughts. As I bent to remove our dinner, I felt David's eyes on me, calculating and watchful. When I straightened and turned around, he was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Smells wonderful," he said, raising his glass in a mock toast, "to family secrets and the things we do for the people we love." My blood turned to ice. Did he know that I knew? Was this his way of testing my knowledge or warning me to stay silent? I raised my own glass of wine, meeting his gaze directly. "To family," I replied, watching for any flicker of reaction in his expression. "And to the truth always coming to light." Something shifted in his eyes, a flash of calculation, perhaps fear, or maybe just recognition that the game between us had fundamentally changed. As we sat down to dinner, the weight of our mutual deception settling over the dining room like a heavy blanket, I realized that neither of us was who the other believed them to be. And somewhere in Portland, Oregon, a cardiologist named Dr. Michael Chen was living his life completely unaware that his biological daughter was about to uncover a secret that would change everything for all of us. I barely slept that night, lying next to David as he breathed evenly beside me, his face peaceful in the moonlight streaming through our bedroom windows. How could someone capable of such elaborate deception sleep so soundly? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the private investigator's reports, the photographs of Dr. Michael Chen, the unsent letter demanding a meeting about financial and legal obligations. At 6 a.m., I slipped out of bed and padded downstairs to make coffee. The security system app had become my obsession, and I scrolled through the previous evening's footage while the coffee brewed. David had been on edge during dinner, his usual charm strained around the edges. After I'd gone to bed claiming a headache, he'd spent 2 hours in his study with the door closed. The camera in the hallway showed him emerging at 11:30 p.m., but something was different. He'd been carrying a small bag, the kind lawyers used for confidential documents. I'd never seen it before, and it hadn't been there when I'd searched his desk. Where had he gotten it, and what was inside? David appeared in the kitchen at 7 a.m. sharp, already dressed for work in his charcoal gray suit. "Morning, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek as he reached for his travel mug. "Sleep well?" "Like a baby," I lied, studying his face for any signs of stress or guilt. He looked tired, but David often worked late and had never been a particularly good sleeper. "I might have to travel next week," he said casually, scrolling through his phone as he spoke. "The Henderson case is heating up, and we need to depose some witnesses in Chicago." This was news to me. David usually mentioned business travel weeks in advance, coordinating with my schedule and making sure I'd be comfortable alone in the house. The sudden trip felt suspicious, especially given everything I'd discovered. "How long will you be gone?" I asked, refilling my coffee cup to hide my shaking hands. 3 or 4 days. I'll know more this afternoon." He paused at the kitchen door, briefcase in hand. "Oh, And Emma called my office yesterday asking about family documents for her genealogy project. Something about wanting copies of birth certificates and marriage licenses. I told her I'd handle it. My heart stopped. Emma was researching family documents, which meant she'd eventually compare what she found with her DNA results. David was trying to control the information flow, but he couldn't manipulate genetic evidence. That's thoughtful of you, I managed, forcing a smile. She's so passionate about that project. David's eyes narrowed slightly, and I realized I'd sounded too eager, too interested. Just family history, he said, his tone carefully neutral. Nothing earth-shattering. After he left, I called in sick to my freelance editing job and spent the morning researching everything I could about Dr. Michael Chen. The private investigator's reports had provided a foundation, but I needed to understand who Emma's biological father really was. Dr. Chen was 54, married to a woman named Patricia for 25 years. Besides Madison, the daughter who'd shown up as Emma's half-sister, they had 2 sons, twins who were currently juniors at Stanford. He was well-respected in his field, had published research on cardiac surgery techniques, and served on the board of several medical charities. Most importantly, he had no idea he had another daughter. The hospital where he'd worked during the time of Emma's conception had been Providence Medical Center in Portland. According to the employment records I found through professional databases, Claire Morrison had been a surgical nurse there for exactly 6 months, from March through August 2004. Emma had been born in May 2005, making her conception timeline fall squarely within that period. I pulled up Providence Medical Center's staff directory from 2004, archived on the hospital's website. There was Claire's photo, younger than I'd ever seen her, with the same auburn hair and green eyes that Emma had inherited. She'd been beautiful, I had to admit, with a warmth in her smile that the photographs in David's study had never captured. Dr. Chen's photo from the same directory showed a handsome man in his 30s, confident and professionally polished. Standing side by side, even in separate staff photos, the resemblance between him and Emma was unmistakable. The same bone structure, the same distinctive chin dimple, even similar hand gestures that I'd noticed in the surveillance footage of him leaving the hospital after his shifts. A new thought struck me. If David had known about Emma's true parentage for years, why had he only recently started investigating Dr. Chen? What had changed to make him suddenly concerned about the secret being exposed? I thought about our prenuptial agreement, locked away in David's office safe. I'd signed it 3 years ago without reading it thoroughly, trusting David's assurances that it was standard protection for both parties. But David was a lawyer specializing in protecting intellectual property and corporate assets. He would have crafted language to protect himself in every conceivable scenario. The blonde woman's visit 3 weeks ago suddenly took on new significance. Had she been Dr. Chen's representative? A lawyer investigating Emma's parentage? Or someone else entirely? I pulled up the security footage again, studying her image more carefully. She'd worn expensive clothes and jewelry, carried herself with authority, and driven a Mercedes SUV with Oregon plates that I hadn't noticed before. The timestamp showed she'd arrived at 2:15 p.m., during business hours when most people would be at work, unless her work involved investigating family secrets. My phone rang, interrupting my research. Emma's number flashed on the screen. "Hey, Melody," she said, sounding excited. "I finally had time to look at my DNA results last night." "This is so cool. I have a half-sister in Portland." "Her name's Madison, and she looks just like me." "Dad never mentioned any relatives in Oregon." My mouth went dry. "That's interesting. Have you mentioned it to your father?" "Not yet. I wanted to research it more first. Madison and I connected through the DNA site, and we've been messaging back and forth. Get this. Her dad is a heart surgeon, and he worked at the same hospital where my mom was a nurse. Small world, right?" Emma had already made contact with Madison. The secret David had spent years protecting was unraveling in real time, and he had no idea. "Emma," I said carefully, "maybe you should talk to your dad before you dig too deep into this. Family history can be complicated." "Why would it be complicated? It's just genealogy. Emma's voice carried that stubborn tone I'd learned to recognize over the years. Madison said her dad doesn't know about the connection yet, but she's going to ask him about working with nurses named Claire. Apparently, he has a great memory for colleagues. This was spiraling out of control. If Madison asked Dr. Chen about Claire and he remembered her, the entire deception would collapse. David would be exposed, but so would Emma, who would learn that the man she'd called father her entire life had been lying to her. "Just promise me you'll talk to your dad first," I said, "before you contact anyone else or share any more information." "You're being weird about this, Melody. It's just family research." After Emma hung up, I sat staring at my phone, trying to calculate how quickly this situation could explode. Emma and Madison were already talking. Madison was planning to ask her father about Claire. David was planning a sudden business trip to Chicago. Or was he really going to Portland to try to control the situation? I needed more information about the blonde woman who'd visited our house. The security cameras had captured her license plate clearly, and I knew David had contacts who could run vehicle registrations. But I couldn't ask him without revealing what I knew. Instead, I called my friend Sarah, who worked as a paralegal at a different law firm. We'd met through our book club, and she'd often mentioned having access to various legal databases through her job. "I need a favor," I said when she answered. "Can you run a license plate for me? It's for a civil matter I'm handling." Sarah had always been curious about my married life, slightly envious of David's success and our comfortable lifestyle. "Of course," she said. "What's the number?" I gave her the Oregon plate number from the Mercedes SUV, along with a story about a minor fender bender that needed documentation. Sarah promised to call me back within an hour. While I waited, I continued researching the connection between Claire and Dr. Chen. The hospital's archived newsletter from summer 2004 contained a photo that made my heart race. It showed the staff at a hospital charity event, with Claire and Dr. Chen standing together in the background, both smiling and holding wine glasses. They looked comfortable together, familiar in a way that suggested more than professional. "Colleagues." Sarah called back 45 minutes later with information that confirmed my worst fears. "The Mercedes is registered to Patricia Chen," she said. "Address in Portland, Oregon. Clean driving record, registered to the same address for 15 years. "Why, who is she?" "Patricia Chen. Dr. Chen's wife had driven from Portland to Westchester County to meet with." David, the timeline was becoming clearer. Somehow she'd learned about Emma's existence and had come to confront the man who'd been raising her husband's biological daughter. But how had she found out? And what had been in the envelope she'd given David? I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing security footage, looking for any other unusual visitors or activities I might have missed. What I found was a pattern of behavior that painted David in an increasingly sinister light. For the past 6 months, he'd been having regular phone conversations in his car, always parked in the garage where the indoor cameras couldn't capture his voice. The garage had motion sensors but no audio recording, so I could only see him gesticulating and occasionally appearing agitated during these calls. He'd also been making frequent trips to a storage unit across town, something I'd never known about. The facility's name was visible on a receipt I found. Photographed in the security footage, he'd carelessly left it on the kitchen counter after one of his visits. That storage unit could contain anything. More evidence about Emma's parentage, financial records he was hiding from me, or documents related to the mysterious business trip to Chicago that I was increasingly certain was really a trip to Portland. I needed to get into that storage unit. David came home at his usual time, bearing flowers and a bottle of my favorite wine, gestures that would have seemed romantic a week ago, but now felt like manipulation. "Thought we could have a nice quiet evening," he said, kissing me hello. Just the two of us. He was trying too hard, his charm more forced than usual. During dinner, he steered the conversation away from Emma and family topics, focusing instead on safe subjects like my volunteer work and upcoming social events. But I noticed he was drinking more than usual, and his phone kept buzzing with messages that he ignored. "Everything okay at work?" I asked as he poured his third glass of wine. "Just the usual client emergencies," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow. After dinner, David retreated to his study while I cleaned up the kitchen. Through the security cameras, I watched him make another phone call, this one longer and more animated than usual. His body language suggested frustration, possibly anger. When he emerged an hour later, he seemed to have made a decision about something. "I need to move up that Chicago trip," he announced. "Flying out tomorrow morning, back Sunday night. 3 days." If he was really going to Portland to meet with Dr. Chen or Patricia, 3 days would give him time to try to control the situation before Emma's research uncovered the truth. "That's sudden," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Will you be able to handle everything you need to in such a short time?" "It's just depositions and document review," he replied, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Boring legal work." That night, after David fell asleep, I accessed the security system one more time. His study camera showed that he'd spent time at his safe, removing documents and placing them in that same small bag I'd seen him with the night before. He was taking evidence with him, but evidence of what? And why did he need it for a business trip that was supposedly about a corporate legal case? I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week ago. While David was in Portland pretending to be in Chicago, I was going to search that storage unit and find out what else my husband had been hiding. But first, I had to warn Emma about what she was about to uncover. I called her at midnight, knowing she'd be awake studying for midterms. "Emma," I said, "I need to tell you something about your DNA results. Something your father doesn't know I've discovered." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity. "What do you mean?" she finally asked, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Your biological father isn't David. It's Dr. Chen, Madison's father. And David has known for years." I heard her sharp intake of breath, then what sounded like a chair scraping against the floor. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Dad would have told me. He wouldn't have lied about something like that." "I have evidence, Emma. Documents, investigation reports, proof that he's been hiding this from both of us. He's planning to leave town tomorrow, and I think he's going to Portland to try to convince Dr. Chen to keep the secret." "Oh my God," Emma said, and I could hear her crying. "My whole life, everything I thought I knew." "Listen to me," I said urgently. "Don't contact Madison again until I can figure out what David is planning. Don't let him know that you know anything. Can you do that? I don't understand. Why would he lie? Why would he keep this secret for so long?" It was the same question I'd been asking myself. What did David have to gain by maintaining the deception? What was he afraid of losing if the truth came out? "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm going to find out while he's gone. Emma, do you have any idea where your father might keep important documents? Maybe in a storage unit or safety deposit box?" "He has a safety deposit box at First National," she said, her voice still shaky with tears. "I went with him once when I was 16 to put my passport in it." "But Melody, if this is true, if he's been lying to me my whole life, what else has he lied about?" That was exactly what I was afraid to discover. After we hung up, I lay in bed listening to David's steady breathing, wondering who the man beside me really was. In 3 years of marriage, I'd thought I knew him completely. He was successful, protective, sometimes controlling, but in ways that seemed to come from love rather than malice. Now I was beginning to see those same traits in a different light. His protectiveness felt more like possessiveness. His success might be built on carefully constructed lies. His control extended to manipulating the truth about his own family. The next morning, David was up early, packing efficiently for his supposed business trip. I made coffee and breakfast, playing the role of supportive wife while documenting his behavior for future reference. "I'll miss you," I said as he loaded his suitcase into the BMW. "Just a few days," he replied, kissing me goodbye. "I'll call tonight." But as I watched him drive away, I knew he wouldn't be calling from Chicago. I had 3 days to uncover the truth about my husband, and I intended to use every minute. Phase 1 was the storage unit. Phase 2 was finding a way into that safety deposit box. Phase 3 was preparing for whatever confrontation would come when David returned and realized that his carefully constructed world of lies was about to collapse. Emma deserved to know who her real father was. I deserved to know who I'd really married. And Dr. Chen deserved to know he had a daughter who'd spent 19 years believing she belonged to someone else. The truth was going to come out, whether David wanted it to or not. I just hoped we'd all survive the explosion when it did. The storage facility was located in an industrial area 20 minutes from our house, sandwiched between a tire shop and a plumbing supply company. I'd driven past it countless times without giving it a second thought, never imagining my husband maintained a secret space there. Secure Store Solutions looked like every other storage facility. Rows of orange metal doors under harsh fluorescent lighting, security cameras mounted at regular intervals, and a bored attendant in a glass booth reading a paperback novel. I'd spent the morning preparing for this mission. Cash for any potential bribes, a story about David being out of town and needing access to our unit for insurance purposes, and lock-picking tools I'd ordered online after watching YouTube tutorials. The tools felt foreign in my hands, but desperation had made me resourceful. The attendant, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, looked up as I approached her window. "I need to access my husband's storage unit," I said, sliding David's business card across the counter. "David Morrison, Unit 247. He's traveling for work and asked me to retrieve some documents." She consulted her computer screen, frowning slightly. "I show the unit is only authorized for Mr. Morrison's access. He'd need to call and add you to the authorization list." I pulled out my phone, showing her David's contact information and a photo of us together from our wedding. "He's in depositions all day and can't be reached. This is really urgent. Insurance paperwork for a claim deadline." The woman's expression softened, and I could see her wavering. I added, "I have the key right here," producing David's spare keychain that I'd found in his desk drawer that morning. "Well," she said, glancing around the empty office, "I suppose if you have the key, My hand shook slightly as I signed Melody Morrison in the ledger, noting that David's last visit had been just 2 days ago, the day before his sudden Chicago trip announcement. Unit 247 was located in the back section of the facility, away from the main foot traffic. The metal door was secured with both the facility's standard lock and David's personal padlock. My hands were steadier now as I used his keys, the locks clicking open with surprising ease. What I found inside changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The unit was meticulously organized, like a private office transplanted into a storage space. Metal shelving lined the walls, filled with banker's boxes labeled by year and category. A small desk sat in the center with a chair and battery-powered lamp. This wasn't random storage. This was David's secret archive. I started with the most recent boxes, labeled 2024 Current Projects. Inside were files that made my stomach turn. Surveillance photos of me, taken without my knowledge over the past 3 years. Images of me at the grocery store, meeting friends for lunch, volunteering at the library. Someone had been following me, documenting my activities, and David had been paying for it. The photographs were accompanied by detailed reports from the same private investigator who'd been researching Dr. Chen. My daily routines were cataloged with clinical precision. Tuesday book club meetings, Thursday volunteer shifts, Friday lunch dates with college friends. Even my medical appointments were documented, including visits to my gynecologist that David had never asked about. But the surveillance went deeper than just tracking my movements. Someone had been investigating my background, my finances, even my family relationships. A thick file contained information about my parents, my college roommates, my ex-boyfriends from before I met David. Financial records showed David had been monitoring my personal bank account and credit card usage through methods that seemed highly illegal. Why was my husband spying on me? I moved to older boxes, finding files that traced back to before our marriage. David had begun investigating me within weeks of our first date, treating our relationship like a legal case requiring evidence and documentation. There were background checks, credit reports, employment verification, even interviews with people from my past. The private investigator had contacted my college professors, former employers, and previous landlords under false pretenses, gathering information that David had used to craft his approach to our relationship. He'd known exactly which topics would interest me, which personal vulnerabilities to address, which romantic gestures would be most effective. Our entire courtship had been manipulation based on psychological profiling, but the most disturbing discovery was a file labeled Insurance and Estate Planning. Inside were multiple life insurance policies on me that I'd never signed, documents suggesting David had forged my signature on beneficiary forms, and what appeared to be a preliminary will draft that left everything to him. I was worth more to David dead than alive. My hands trembled as I photographed each document with my phone, building evidence of a conspiracy I was only beginning to understand. The insurance policies were substantial, over $2 million in coverage through different companies, all taken out after our marriage with David as the sole beneficiary. There were also medical records that I'd never authorized him to access, including detailed reports from my annual physicals and blood work results. Someone had been tracking my health status with the thoroughness of a person planning for specific contingencies. A manila folder labeled Contingency Plans contained scenarios that read like a thriller novel. Different methods for creating accidental deaths, research into poison detection timeframes, and disturbing notes about making deaths appear natural or suicide-related. David wasn't just hiding Emma's parentage. He was planning to murder me. The realization hit me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air in the stifling storage unit. I sank into the chair, trying to process the scope of his deception. Our marriage wasn't just built on lies. It was a long-term plan to acquire my assets through fraud and murder. But why? I wasn't wealthy by David's standards. My trust fund from my grandparents was modest, my freelance income minimal, my personal assets negligible compared to his law firm partnership. The answer was in a box labeled Morrison Financial Holdings. David's finances weren't what they appeared to be. His law firm was facing serious financial difficulties, with multiple partners under investigation for embezzlement and fraud. David's own accounts showed massive debts, failed investments, and what appeared to be gambling losses totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was broke, possibly facing criminal charges, and desperately needed my insurance money to save himself. The timeline became clear as I studied the documents. David's financial troubles had accelerated about 6 months ago. Around the same time, he'd increased his surveillance of me and begun researching methods for creating accidental deaths. Emma's DNA test had created an additional problem for him. If the truth about her parentage came out, it could expose the broader web of lies he'd built his life on. Patricia Chen's visit hadn't been about blackmail. It had been about confrontation. She'd somehow learned about Emma and had come to demand answers. The envelope she'd given David likely contained DNA evidence proving her husband was Emma's biological father, evidence that could unravel everything if it became public during a murder investigation. Found copies of emails between David and his private investigator, discussing permanent solutions to the Emma problem and the Portland situation. The language was coded, but clear. They were planning to eliminate anyone who could expose David's secrets. That included me, Emma, and possibly Dr. Chen's family. My phone buzzed with a text message from David. Safe in Chicago. Miss you already. Call tonight? He was lying about his location while planning my murder. The casual intimacy of his message felt like a knife in my chest. I photographed everything, my phone's storage filling with evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. But photographs wouldn't be enough. I needed the physical documents, and I needed to get them somewhere safe before David returned. I began loading the most incriminating files into the empty boxes I'd brought, working quickly but carefully to maintain the storage unit's organization. David was meticulous. He'd notice if anything was out of place. As I worked, I found more disturbing evidence. Records of other women David had dated before me. including one who died in a suspicious car accident 6 months before we met. The file contained insurance claims, police reports, and what appeared to be payoffs to officials who'd ruled her death accidental, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. David was a serial killer, and I was his next target. The woman's name was Rebecca Hartley, and she'd been a successful real estate agent with substantial assets. Like me, she'd been investigated extensively before her death. Like me, she'd had large life insurance policies taken out without her knowledge. Unlike me, she hadn't discovered the truth in time. Rebecca's file contained a timeline showing David's methodical approach to her murder. Months of surveillance, relationship manipulation, financial positioning, and finally the execution of a plan that resulted in her car going off a mountain road during what was supposed to be a romantic weekend getaway. The parallels to my own situation were terrifying. David had been suggesting weekend trips recently, particularly to remote locations with dangerous driving conditions. Our anniversary was next month, and he'd proposed a cabin retreat in the Adirondacks, mountainous terrain with winding roads and plenty of opportunities for accidents. I was supposed to die on our anniversary trip. My phone rang, startling me so badly that I nearly dropped the file I was holding. Emma's name appeared on the screen. "Melody," she said, her voice urgent and frightened. "Something's wrong." Madison tried to call her father about Mom, and his office said he left town suddenly this morning. His wife told Madison that Dr. Chen had received a call from someone claiming to know about a secret daughter, and he'd flown to New York to investigate. David hadn't gone to Chicago at all. He was here in New York, meeting with Dr. Chen while I was discovering his murder plans. "Emma, listen to me carefully," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You need to get somewhere safe immediately. Don't go home, don't follow your normal routine, and don't trust anyone who claims to be helping you. Your father isn't who we thought he was." "What do you mean?" "Melody, you're scaring me." "He's been planning to kill me," I said, the words sounding surreal even as I spoke them. I found evidence, insurance policies, surveillance reports, plans for making it look like an accident. This isn't just about hiding your parentage. This is about murder and fraud and covering up other crimes. The silence on Emma's end stretched for what felt like an eternity. "That's impossible," she finally whispered. "He's my father. He loves us. He wouldn't— Emma, I need you to listen. Your father has killed before. A woman named Rebecca Hartley died in a car accident 6 months before he met me. The same pattern. Surveillance, manipulation, insurance fraud, then murder." I could hear Emma crying, her world collapsing just as mine had been collapsing for the past week. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice small and broken. "We gather evidence and we get help. But first we stay alive long enough to expose him." I finished loading the files into my car, taking extra care to photograph the storage unit's organization so I could return everything exactly as I'd found it. David couldn't know I'd discovered his plans until I was ready to act on the evidence. On the drive home, I called my friend Sarah at the law firm, asking her to research criminal defense attorneys who specialized in domestic violence and fraud cases. I couldn't involve local police yet. David had too many connections in the legal community, and some of his files suggested he'd cultivated relationships with law enforcement officials. I needed federal authorities. People beyond David's influence who could investigate his crimes without warning him. Back at home, I uploaded all the photographic evidence to a secure cloud storage account, then made copies on multiple flash drives. I mailed one drive to my sister in California, with instructions to give it to authorities if anything happened to me. Another went to my lawyer with similar instructions. The original documents I'd taken from the storage unit went into a safety deposit box at a different bank than the one David used, along with a detailed letter explaining everything I'd discovered. By evening, I'd created an insurance policy of my own, multiple copies of evidence in the hands of people who would act if David succeeded in killing me. But I wasn't planning to be a victim. David called at 8 p.m., his voice warm and loving as he told me about his fictional day in Chicago. I played the part of the devoted wife, asking about his hotel and his meetings while taking notes for future evidence of his lies. "Miss you too," I said, when he told me he loved me. "Can't wait for you to come home." The words tasted like poison, but I needed him to believe nothing had changed. After we hung up, I began planning my counterattack. David thought he was manipulating me toward my death, but he was actually walking into a trap of his own making. Emma called again at midnight, having spent the day researching Dr. Chen and Madison. "I found something," she said. "Madison posted on social media about her father flying to New York for a family emergency. She's worried because he's never left town without telling her exactly where he'd be. David is using Dr. Chen somehow," I realized, "either as an alibi for being in New York instead of Chicago, or as part of whatever he's planning next. Melody, what if Dr. Chen is in danger too? What if Dad plans to hurt him to keep the secret?" The thought had occurred to me. If David was willing to kill me to cover up his financial crimes, he might be willing to kill Dr. Chen to cover up Emma's parentage. And if he killed Dr. Chen while supposedly being in Chicago, he'd have an alibi for that murder too. "We have to warn him," Emma said. "Whatever Dad is planning, it's happening now." I looked at the clock, 12:15 a.m. David had been in New York for almost 18 hours. Plenty of time to arrange a meeting with Dr. Chen and set whatever plan he had in motion. "Emma, I need you to do something for me. Contact Madison and ask her for her father's phone number. We're going to call Dr. Chen and warn him about David. What if it's too late? What if something's already happened? Then we document everything and make sure David pays for his crimes." As I waited for Emma to get Dr. Chen's contact information, I reviewed everything I'd learned in the storage unit. David's plan was sophisticated, patient, and ruthless. He'd been building toward my murder for months while simultaneously managing the threat Emma's DNA test posed to his carefully constructed life. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated both his wife and his daughter. Emma and I weren't going to be victims. We were going to be the architects of his downfall. The question was whether we could act fast enough to save Dr. Chen and prevent David from adding another murder to his list of crimes. My phone buzzed, with a text from Emma. "Got his number? Madison is scared. Her father hasn't checked in since this morning." It was time to make the call that could save a life or confirm our worst fears about what David was capable of. Dr. Michael. Chen answered his phone on the first ring, his voice tight with anxiety. "Hello? Dr. Chen, this is Melody Morrison. I'm calling about Emma Morrison, who I believe is your biological daughter." The silence that followed lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "How did you get this number?" he finally asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Your daughter Madison gave it to Emma. Dr. Chen, I need to tell you something urgent. The man who's been raising Emma, my husband David Morrison, he's not who you think he is. Your life may be in danger." "I'm already aware of Mr. Morrison," Dr. Chen said slowly. "I'm currently at the Marriott near LaGuardia Airport. He contacted me this afternoon requesting a meeting about Emma." My heart stopped. "Dr. Chen, please listen carefully. David has killed before. I found evidence that he murdered his previous girlfriend for insurance money. Whatever meeting he's arranged, it's a trap." "That's quite an accusation," Dr. Chen replied, but I could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. "I have documentation. Police reports, insurance claims, surveillance records. David is facing financial ruin and criminal charges. He's been planning to kill me for months, and now that you represent a threat to expose his lies about Emma, you're in danger too." I could hear Dr. Chen moving around, possibly pacing his hotel room. "The meeting is set for tomorrow morning at a construction site in Queens. He said it would be private, away from potential witnesses who might complicate Emma's life." "A construction site?" My blood ran cold. "Dr. Chen, that's not for privacy. Construction sites have industrial accidents. Heavy machinery, dangerous conditions, easy ways to make murder look accidental." "Jesus," he whispered. I thought something felt wrong about his approach. He was too insistent on the location, kept emphasizing how we needed to protect Emma from publicity. "Where are you right now? Are you alone?" "My hotel room. I flew out this morning after my wife told me about some woman calling with questions about a nurse named Claire Morrison. I've been trying to remember details about working with her 20 years ago. David's wife Patricia visited our house 3 weeks ago. She must have discovered the connection somehow and confronted David. That's what triggered this whole situation. Patricia? Dr. Chen sounded confused. My wife's name is Susan, not Patricia. She's been Susan Chen for 25 years. The blonde woman hadn't been Dr. Chen's wife. So who was she, and how did she know about Emma's parentage? Dr. Chen, we need to involve the FBI immediately. David has crossed state lines. There's evidence of multiple murders, insurance fraud, and he's planning to kill both of us. I have a colleague who works with federal law enforcement on medical fraud cases, Dr. Chen said. Let me make some calls. While Dr. Chen contacted his federal connections, I called Emma back. Is Dr. Chen safe? She asked immediately, for now. But Emma, the woman who visited our house, wasn't Dr. Chen's wife. Her name is Patricia, but his wife is Susan. We still don't know who the mystery woman is or how she learned about your parentage. Melody, I've been thinking about something. Remember how Dad always had access to Mom's personal documents? What if he's been monitoring other people connected to that time period? The idea sent chills down my spine. If David had been tracking Claire's former colleagues and acquaintances, he might have discovered other secrets, other potential threats to his carefully constructed life. Emma, I need you to stay at your dorm and don't leave for any reason. Don't trust anyone who claims to be helping with this situation. If David realizes we've uncovered his plans, he might try to eliminate you as a witness. What about you? If he comes home and suspects you know something? I looked around our house, suddenly seeing every room as a potential crime scene. I'm not staying here tonight. I've got evidence hidden in multiple locations, and I've documented everything. If David tries anything, the authorities will have enough to convict him, Dr. Chen called back 20 minutes later with news that gave me hope for the first time in days. I reached Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI's white-collar crime unit, he said. She's worked on cases involving cross-state insurance fraud and suspicious deaths. When I described the situation, she said they've actually been investigating suspicious insurance claims involving wealthy men whose partners died in accidents. David might not be working alone, I realized. There could be a whole network of people involved in this type of fraud. Agent Martinez wants to meet with both of us tomorrow morning. She's flying up from D.C. tonight. But here's the important part. She wants me to keep my meeting with David while wearing a wire. They need him on record discussing his plans. The thought of Dr. Chen walking into David's trap, even with FBI backup, terrified me. That's incredibly dangerous. If David suspects anything, Agent Martinez assured me they'll have surveillance teams positioned throughout the area. The moment David attempts violence, they'll move in. I spent the night in a hotel room across town, reviewing all the evidence I'd gathered and preparing for what would either be David's arrest or the beginning of an even more dangerous game of cat and mouse. At 6 a.m., Agent Martinez called my burner phone, Mrs. Morrison. I've reviewed the evidence you photographed from the storage unit. Combined with Dr. Chen's testimony and our ongoing investigation into similar cases, we have enough for warrants. How many other cases? I asked. We've identified at least 6 suspicious deaths over the past decade involving men who match your husband's profile. Wealthy professionals whose partners died in accidents shortly after large insurance policies were taken out. David was part of a serial killing network that targeted women for their insurance payouts. The scope of the conspiracy was far beyond anything I'd imagined. The meeting between Dr. Chen and your husband is set for 9 a.m. at a construction site in Astoria, Agent Martinez continued. We'll have the area surrounded, but we need you somewhere safe until this is over. I want to be there, I said. Hidden, but close enough to see David arrested. Agent Martinez agreed to position me in a surveillance van where I could observe the takedown while remaining protected. At 8:30 a.m., I watched through high-definition cameras as Dr. Chen arrived at the construction site. The location was perfect for David's purposes. A half-built office complex surrounded by heavy machinery, deep excavation sites, and minimal security. Dr. Chen looked nervous but determined as he positioned himself according to FBI instructions, the wire hidden beneath his jacket, transmitting clearly to our surveillance equipment. David arrived precisely on time, driving a rental car I didn't recognize, even from a distance. I could see the tension in his body language as he approached Dr. Chen. He was carrying a briefcase that likely contained documents intended to convince Dr. Chen to keep Emma's parentage secret. Dr. Chen? David's voice came through the surveillance equipment clearly. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Mr. Morrison, I have to say your request was quite surprising. I'm sure it was. Let's walk while we talk. These construction sites can be dangerous, and I want to make sure we have privacy. David was already maneuvering Dr. Chen toward the excavation area, just as I'd feared. Agent Martinez's voice crackled through the surveillance team's headsets. Stay alert. Subject is moving target toward predetermined danger zone. I've been raising Emma as my daughter for 19 years, David continued, his voice taking on the persuasive tone I'd heard him use in legal negotiations. She has no idea that I'm not her biological father, and learning the truth now would devastate her. I can understand your concern, Dr. Chen replied carefully. But doesn't she have a right to know? Rights can be complicated, Dr. Chen, especially when they conflict with other people's interests. They'd reached the edge of a deep foundation excavation. David positioned himself so that Dr. Chen's back was to the drop-off, a classic intimidation tactic that also provided an opportunity for an accidental fall. What exactly are you proposing? Dr. Chen asked. Simple. You forget this meeting ever happened. You never mention Emma to your family. You let her continue believing that I'm her father. And if I refuse? David's demeanor shifted, the mask of reasonableness dropping away to reveal something much darker. Then I'll have to consider what's best for everyone involved, including your family in Portland. It was a threat against Dr. Chen's wife and children. Through the surveillance equipment, I could see Agent Martinez signaling her teams to prepare for immediate intervention. Are you threatening my family? Dr. Chen asked, his voice steady despite the obvious danger. I'm explaining the consequences of poor decisions, David replied. You see, Dr. Chen, I've built a very successful life by anticipating problems and solving them before they become crises. You and Emma represent potential problems. And how do you solve problems like us? David smiled, and even through the camera feed, the expression was chilling. Accidents happen every day. Construction sites are particularly dangerous. Medical professionals sometimes suffer heart attacks under stress. Young college students can have tragic car accidents or overdoses. He was confessing to planning murders while standing at the edge of a construction site. The FBI had everything they needed. Teams move in now, Agent Martinez ordered. What happened next unfolded with the precision of a military operation. FBI agents emerged from concealment positions throughout the construction site, surrounding David before he could react. Additional teams were simultaneously raiding our house, David's office, and the storage unit. David's face went through a range of emotions: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally a cold acceptance that his carefully planned life was over. David Morrison, Agent Martinez announced as she approached with her weapon drawn. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and violation of federal racketeering statutes. I watched through the surveillance feed as they handcuffed my husband, reading him his rights while he stood in the place where he'd planned to murder Dr. Chen. His lawyer's training kicked in immediately. He remained silent, his face a mask of professional composure even as his world collapsed around him. The aftermath moved quickly. Within hours, federal agents had seized David's assets, arrested his private investigator and several associates, and begun unraveling a conspiracy that had operated for over a decade. Emma drove down from college that afternoon, arriving at the federal building as I finished giving my formal statement. When I saw her in the waiting room, we both broke down crying. Grief for the life we'd thought we knew, relief that we'd survived, and overwhelming gratitude that the truth had finally come to light. Dr. Chen met his biological daughter for the first time in a sterile conference room, with FBI agents present to document their conversation. Despite the surreal circumstances, There was an immediate connection between them. The same mannerisms, similar ways of processing information, an unmistakable family resemblance that made David's years of deception seem even more cruel. "I want you to know," Dr. Chen told Emma, "that if I had known about you, I would have been part of your life from the beginning." "Your mother never told me she was pregnant," Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I don't blame you for not knowing. I blame the man who kept us apart." The investigation revealed the full scope of David's crimes. He'd been part of a network that identified wealthy women, researched their backgrounds, then arranged introductions through seemingly random social events. The men would court their targets methodically, marry them, take out substantial life insurance policies, and then arrange accidents. Rebecca Hartley had been David's previous victim, but she wasn't his first. FBI agents identified 4 other women who'd died under suspicious circumstances after becoming involved with men connected to the conspiracy. The network had operated with sophisticated planning, using legitimate businesses as fronts and corrupted officials to ensure investigations were cursory. David's law firm had unknowingly provided legal cover for some of their activities, with David manipulating case files and client information to serve the conspiracy's needs. Agent Martinez explained that my discovery of the evidence had broken open a case they'd been investigating for 3 years. "Without your courage in coming forward, we might never have connected all these murders," she told me. The blonde woman who'd visited our house was identified as Patricia Knowles, a private investigator working for an insurance company that had become suspicious of the pattern of claims. She'd traced the connections between David and several suspicious deaths, leading her to investigate Emma's parentage as part of building a larger case. Her visit to David had been an attempt to gather evidence, but it had also triggered his accelerated timeline for killing me. If Emma hadn't decided to take that DNA test, David might have succeeded in making my death look like an accident during our anniversary trip. The legal proceedings stretched over months. David ultimately pled guilty to avoid the death penalty, receiving life in prison without parole. His co-conspirators received similar sentences, and the network that had terrorized wealthy women for years was finally dismantled. Emma and I both testified at the sentencing hearing, describing the impact of David's deception on our lives. He showed no remorse, sitting silently as we spoke about the betrayal, fear, and trauma he'd caused. During my testimony, I looked directly at him as I spoke. "You stole years of my life through lies and manipulation. You denied Emma the chance to know her real father. You murdered innocent women for money. But you didn't break us. We're stronger now than we ever were when we believed your lies." David's expression never changed, but I saw something flicker in his eyes, perhaps recognition that his victims had ultimately defeated him. The aftermath brought unexpected healing. Emma developed a close relationship with Dr. Chen and his family, finally experiencing the unconditional love of a parent who valued her for who she was rather than what she could provide. Madison, Emma's half-sister, became one of her closest friends. They discovered shared interests, similar talents, and the kind of sibling bond that transcended the years they'd lost. Dr. Chen's wife, Susan, welcomed Emma into their family with open arms, having always wanted a daughter to complement their 2 sons. She helped Emma process the trauma of discovering that her entire childhood had been built on deception. For my part, I found myself surrounded by a support network I'd never known I needed. Sarah from the law firm became a true friend rather than just a book club acquaintance. Agent Martinez checked in regularly, helping me navigate the emotional aftermath of uncovering my husband's crimes. The house in Westchester County was sold, with the proceeds going to a victims' compensation fund for families affected by the conspiracy. I moved to a smaller place closer to Emma's college, rebuilding my life with authenticity rather than the artificial perfection David had insisted upon. Emma changed her name legally to Emma Chen, honoring both her biological father and her desire for a fresh start. She switched her major from business to criminal justice, inspired by the FBI agents who'd saved our lives. "I want to help other families like ours," she told me. "I want to make sure people like David don't get away with destroying lives." A year after David's arrest, Emma, Dr. Chen, and I gathered for what we called our truth anniversary, marking the day we'd learned who we really were, rather than who David had wanted us to be. "Do you ever regret taking that DNA test?" I asked Emma as we shared dinner at Dr. Chen's house in Portland. "Never," she replied without hesitation. Learning the truth was terrifying, but living a lie was worse. "At least now I know who my real family is." Dr. Chen raised his glass in a toast. "To the courage to seek truth even when it's dangerous. To the love that survives deception. And to the family we've found in the most unlikely circumstances." As we clinked glasses, I thought about how a simple genealogy project had saved multiple lives and brought down a network of killers. Emma's curiosity about her heritage had led to justice for women who died believing their husbands loved them. The truth had indeed set us free, but it had also taught us that freedom comes with responsibility, to protect each other, to question what seems too perfect, and to never stop fighting for justice. David Morrison would spend the rest of his life in prison, but Emma Chen was just beginning hers, surrounded by people who loved her for exactly who she was. And that, I realized, was the best revenge of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.